I've never tried this before, but I'm taking my trusty hot glue gun to a rock to see what we can create. Let's see how this adventure goes. Since I wasn't sure how this was going to turn out, I didn't want to use Santorini stones in case it was a complete bust, so I am using some homemade stones that are shaped like Santorinis. It's a cool mold, and it's also a kind of an affordable way to get the same smooth rocks without the cost of a Santorini stone. So I'm base coating them white just because I want to have a little base coat on there, and then I'm taking a chalk pencil and I'm going to create a center circle and then just draw some petals going around that center circle, and I'm going to keep extending the petals offset from the row before it all the way around the rock. I'm going to check that hot glue gun since it has not been used in a hot minute. You can tell it's well loved, and just make sure that the glue is hot enough and that we're ready to go. And then I'm going to just very carefully go over the outline of the design that I created with the chalk pencil. This is probably the hardest part of this design, and you really do have to kind of get a feel for the hot glue gun. It probably would have been smart to practice on paper first, but I just jumped right in. So that would be one afterthought recommendation I would give to you. Hot glue is kind of funny to work with. It dries quickly. I'm using this pointy tool to try and smooth out some of the globby spots. I also had to pull off a lot of strings. I forgot about those darn hot glue strings. But you just kind of have to get into a rhythm and feel the best way that the glue will work for you. And eventually what I found was the most successful attack with the glue gun was to kind of get a little bit of glue coming out of the glue gun and then kind of pull it along. So it's almost like you had glue hanging and you kind of pull it and then lay it down along the pattern that you want. It definitely took practice, so I think it would not be a terrible idea to try working with paper first, just so you get a feel for the glue gun. I also think my glue gun is really old. A new one might work a little better. It might not have to pull the trigger as hard to make the glue come out. I got this idea because I've seen several reels on Instagram where people use hot glue guns on canvas, and I even remember seeing it way back in COVID when people were doing really creative crafts. But they would use hot glue on canvas and then just paint over it in a single color. So I have always wanted to try this on a rock, and since I've been not painting for a couple of weeks because of how busy life has been, I thought, you know what, let's just go for gold and do something crazy and challenging for the first video back after a break. This project definitely was a time-consuming one. It was kind of an all-day project that I kept coming back to on a day off. But I've condensed it down to about a 10-minute video so that you can kind of see the whole process that I went through. So I gradually started to get the hang of the glue and just kind of went for it. I'm speeding it up here so that you can see how the glue lays down, how the pattern kind of evolves as it's heading towards the outside of the entire rock. After the glue had dried, I came back with some tweezers and just kind of grabbed all of those little strings that are there from when you're pulling the glue gun away after it's dried. And then I had one globby spot that I decided to just snip off so that I could replace the glue and make it a little smoother. And one thing I noticed with this is that the glue was not adhering super duper well to the paint. Like, you could peel it off pretty easily. And I should have said this at the beginning, but I have no plans to hide these out in the community because my local rock group has a rule about not having anything glued on. So not googly eyes, not temporary tattoos, not labels. So we don't glue or attach anything onto our rocks, just for wildlife protection. And, you know, it could degrade over time if the sealer's not good enough, if it's out in the elements. So I will not be hiding these out. I'll probably give them as a gift or maybe as a prize or something. I'm not sure yet. This is a second rock that I'm going to work on, and I decided to make a larger design this time. So the other one had kind of smaller petals. This would have been the better design to start with to get used to the glue, but you know, I went backwards. This is the color scheme that I chose to color in these flowers, and I want to dig out my airbrush. So I am going for all the hard things, not necessarily hard, just time consuming and requires patience. So you need to mix paint with water until it has about the consistency of milk before you put it in the airbrush. So I have a whole video about that. So I'm going to test that out before I go to the rock. And then I'm going to start in the center, kind of the center of the flower for both rocks, and just get this purple color on first. And then I'm just going to repeat the process with the other 3 colors because I have to clean out the airbrush in between, which involves spraying out all of the paint and then clear water until it's spraying clean. It wasn't fully charged, so I had to keep plugging it in. So you get to skip all of that stuff and just see the painting part. What I did realize as I was airbrushing is with some of them, I was not thinning the paint out quite enough. And when you don't thin the paint out enough, it gets kind of splattery when it's coming out of the airbrush. So I was getting a little frustrated that it wasn't coming out in that nice fine mist. Again, another thing that could have been solved if I played around on some paper and reacquainted myself with the airbrush. But in any case, I think it still came out really cool and it created a cool effect. So I'm painting over the glue as well. If you don't have the airbrush, I think what you could do is maybe before you lay the glue down, use the blending trick with a makeup sponge. You could kind of create a gradient with a makeup sponge or even a paintbrush and then put the glue down on top of that. Or you could try painting over it. It might get a little clumpy because the airbrush is a nice fine mist. So I think you could do it either way. Paint first, glue first, but you still could achieve this kind of blended look with a makeup sponge or with a paintbrush. And with this last color of the kind of lavender purple, I want to make sure that I also get the edges of each of the rocks so that they have full coverage, kind of like the flowers blooming over the edges, and the glue kind of goes over fairly close to the edge of the rocks too. So I just want to make sure that the color goes all the way on the front side and edges. And the last time I used the airbrush, I didn't wear a glove and I sprayed my hand neon green. So at least I remembered a glove this time, so it's protecting my hand and my fingernails from all the paint. It did come off pretty easily, but it's easier to just pull it off a glove. And the next step, we're not done yet, it looks cool even with the raised glue, is we're gonna take this gold paint from Deco Art. It's really pretty, it's very shimmery, it's a beautiful color of gold, and a thin paintbrush, and we are going to paint all of the hot glue. So I just thought this would give it a nice pop. I think it does look kind of cool just with the raised texture of the glue, but the gold took it to the next level. This was also a pretty time-consuming process because you do have to be careful that you're just getting the glue. I did slip off and get some of the rock some of the time, but if you catch it while it's still wet, you can kind of wipe it off with a clean, wet paintbrush. The other thing when you're doing this is that it's pretty easy to paint the tops of the glue, but then because it's so raised, you'll notice that the sides of the glue also need to be painted gold because it's raised up enough. So there's a little bit of height there that you want to make sure the gold is covering that too, so that at any angle you're seeing the gold on the hot glue. So this flower obviously took me longer because there was more petals, they were smaller, the glue was a little bit thinner, so I had to be extra careful in making sure I was getting just the glue colored gold. But you can see as it's kind of speeding up and it's evolving, as you can see how cool that gold just makes the whole design pop. And my teenage daughter even liked it, so that's how I know it's really cool. When the teenage daughter thinks something crafty is cool, you're on the right track. The other thing that's going to be a little challenging or just different, I think, is resining these rocks. I think I'm going to need more resin than normal. So I'm going to go ahead and show you that process. I don't usually include that, but I wanted to raise these up off of my sheet. So I'm putting them on top of some other rocks so that I can get the edges decently. I'm going to use this J. Dixon UV resin, and I'm going to add a little bit more than I normally do because I want to make sure that I get resin into all of the little wells in between the glue. I did have to spend some time making sure it reached the corners and that all the surfaces were covered. but it was actually very well worth it. It came out so shiny and so beautiful, and it still has texture. You can still feel the hot glue, but this was an experiment that made me very happy because I love how it turned out. I hope this video gave you some inspiration to try something new and exciting, and if not, hopefully it was entertaining. Thanks so much for stopping by to watch, and I'll see you next time. Take care.